Hello, hello. Can you hear me now? I am Megan Powers, and this is episode 8 of Making a Marketer. Um, After a brief break, we're back with a mid-month 30-minute show coming to you live here on Facebook. And we have an awesome guest today. So this is our mid-month show. Is that we're a little off schedule, but I did schedule this last year. So I'm super stoked that we could fit into Thom's busy schedule. Thom is a fellow San Diego State Aztec. Go Aztecs. He lives in Austin, Texas, and he's a speaker, an event prof, which I'll qualify here in a sec, and a podcaster, but he started out as a marketer. And so it seemed to me like the perfect fit to have him on the show. Welcome, Thom.
Thanks for having me.
How is it looking in Austin today? Is it like a springtime day?
So it's been a little cold the last few days. I was actually in Chicago and it was colder in Austin and it was like 25 degrees in Chicago. So schools were closed and it was frozen. But I think day after tomorrow, we're going to be 72 degrees. So we'll have San Diego weather on Saturday.
That's awesome. Well, that's the thing about Texas, right? And Colorado, I feel like you just wait a minute. Well, they say the same thing about Chicago, but just wait a minute and the weather will.
That's right. If you don't like the weather, it's going to change.
I did golf in Colorado once where we literally had 4 seasons in 14 holes. It was really, it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. So, I mentioned he's a speaker. He's a certified speaking pro by the National Speaker Association, which is a really big deal. And so by virtue of that, I consider him to be an event prof. And I met him at the PCMA Convening Leaders Conference, not this January, but the previous in Vancouver. And he's a podcaster, and he's got a podcast called Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. So, but he did get his start in all this madness through marketing. So I wanted you to tell that story, because I think it's a super cool story.
So I started out, actually, I was a salesperson, and I really liked the marketing people and the companies I worked for. And I started getting really involved with the American Marketing Association, and an opportunity came up from one of my clients. And I, at the time, was a salesperson, and I sold to law firms. And one of the big law firms, it was a California-based firm in San Francisco, but with 10 offices around the country, they came to me and said, would you be interested in hanging up your sales hat? Because back then, especially, law firms didn't have salespeople. In fact, you couldn't even say the word sales inside a law firm because that was considered like wrong. And they said, we think you do a great job. And the company I worked for was pulling out of Austin. And so they wanted me to move to Houston, and I didn't want to go. I didn't want to leave Austin. And the law firm came to me. They were my biggest client. And they said, what if you became our marketing person, but we really let you sort of design the position around yourself? So I became sort of a hybrid marketing person and salesperson. They gave me sort of the mantra of biz dev. But my job was that I was busy promoting the lawyers. My job was to protect and promote the image of the firm 24/7. And I loved that job. I did it for 4 years. I moved with a group of lawyers to a second firm. And so that's how I kind of got into marketing. And then I stayed in that realm for several more years.
I love that. In fact, I wrote a blog post today about companies focusing too much on a position and whether someone fits in that square peg rather than hiring for people or skills and culture fit, and knowing this is somebody we know we want as part of our organization. And so what could he or she do to still stay with us and help the business grow? And so that's awesome. And it wasn't like it forever ago, right? That was like
it was 15 years ago. I went to work for the law firm 15 years ago, and so it's been a long time since I did that.
Yeah, I was kind of teasing because, like, same thing. I shocked myself today when I realized how many years it had been, because I wrote another blog post talking about my first job out of school. And, I was like, no, it couldn't have been that many years ago. I'm still 25. How does that?
Well, I think I'm a little older than you, but we both left San Diego State kind of within the same era. And I laugh when I look at it because it has been a lifetime ago. When I look at, how long it's been since I was 22 or 23 years old, I mean, it's almost been 2 decades, but it's all good.
I know. And I get around the collegians at San Diego State, and I think they really, I'm that old woman that used to come around. And cool.
Yeah, my 16-year-old daughter, we just took her on a tour. We signed up and got a college tour of San Diego State. And I actually walked around the campus going, wait a minute, I'm the dad on the college tour at my own campus. That's frightening.
That is frightening. And your fraternity house is a parking lot.
That's right. The Beta Theta Pi chapter at San Diego State got not only closed down, it got bulldozed, and it is literally a parking lot. So when we were there, my wife literally looked at it and said, well, they paved paradise and put up a parking lot.
Parking lot, exactly. That's so funny. I was just singing that song in my head. Hilarious. I want to say hi to Jen Cole and Elizabeth Glau. They're on the live, and they're my co-hosts for this show. So on the hour shows, the two of them are on. Thank you. And then Elizabeth also said, great topic. I was lucky to find a company that created a job for me. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what's so awesome when you're out in the wild, right? And like you meet someone and they know that there's a place for you because of who you are, and then make it for you. That's just awesome. I love that.
And that's what happened with the law firm. They literally, their marketing person was leaving, and they interviewed 3 or 4 people, and it came down to me and another person who had a background as a legal marketing executive. And I came out of sales in a whole different area. And the other person was shocked when I was hired. And one of our mutual friends told her they wanted him. They created the position around him because they thought that he could do it differently. They weren't looking for another legal marketing person. They were looking for somebody who would go out there and recreate it. And I think when companies do that, it's awesome.
Totally. 100%. And hi, Alex. Alex Paxton's also on. We've got lots of friends. Yeah, he and Nick popped on for a sec. I don't know if he's still on or not, but Nick Borelli. So I love when former guests too come on, because it's all about the podcasting love. And speaking of, so that was kind of what I want to ask you about next. Tell us about cool things entrepreneurs do, and then I have if you want to share maybe one thing that you could recommend for new podcasters starting out. What would be your biggest pearl of wisdom?
Sure. So I just released my 325th episode. So I've been doing this for a little over 3 years. I have a show that comes out twice a week. As you said, it's called Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. And it grew out of a series of blog posts I used to do on my blog called Cool Things My Friends Do, because I blogged for 10 years and I got tired of just telling people what I thought or my thoughts about marketing and sales and business development. And I started looking around at cool things my friends were doing. And I started writing, whether it was they took a ride on a motorcycle across the country, or they got a new job, or they released a book. And then the podcasting stuff really started to get hot 3.5, 4 years ago. And I was at a conference and somebody said, look, if you really want to get out of a rut, and I think I was feeling that way, they said, interview 50 people. And I thought, I'm going to do that for my blog. I'm going to do 50 interviews, and that'll get me inspired, and I'll see successful people. And then everybody was like, Tom, you should make that a podcast. And again, 4 years ago, everybody who breathed air was being told to start a podcast. And I thought, well, cool things my friends do. Nobody cares what Thom Singer's friends do. But most of my friends were entrepreneurs. So I sort of retooled it and made it cool things entrepreneurs do. And I ask people who are solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and just sometimes people who have jobs but are really entrepreneurial in the way they do them. I ask for their advice on how anyone out there can get more entrepreneurial and do more in their career. And the show's been going for 3+ years. And there was just an article on Inc.com that named it one of 8 podcasts for entrepreneurs to listen to in 2018. And I will be honest, that took a big jump in my listenership after that came up. So keep listening.
I'm so happy for you. That's amazing. Like seriously rad. Like I wrote it down because I was like, I have to say something about that. That's so I have to know before we get to the other question, because now I'm just twice a week. That's a lot of work. So have you like created shortcuts for yourself on prep and production, and how do you go about
So from the beginning, I've worked with a production company called Podfly Productions, and they're now a sponsor of my show because I've told so many people about them and how great they are that they finally came to me and said, okay, keep that up, but let's make this a formal deal. So they are my sponsor. But the reality is that having a production company, I just have to do the interviews. They do all the editings. If I have a coughing fit or my guest forgets their name or something like that, they can go and edit it out and make it all sound seamless. They do all the posting. They make sure I'm all up to date so that it's going to iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and my own blog and everything else. And that's great. So that's doing it twice a week. But it's hard because you have to constantly be thinking about, how do I get different guests? And I went through a phase where I just interviewed a lot of other speakers and authors because those were all my friends. And it was easy to get my friends on the show. But now I'm interviewing larger company people, and so I have to plan ahead a little bit more. But yeah, even if you're doing the show once a month, it's work, and you have to do it consistently or you're never going to have an audience.
No, for sure. So Alex says, I care what Thom Singer's friends do.
Well, Alex, if I was still doing cool things my friends do, you would certainly be on the show for sure. So that's good.
That's awesome. So I went to a San Diego MPI local chapter event here the other day, and they had some breakouts. And I attended the one that was called Harnessing Your Entrepreneurial ADD. It was really cool because it was, of course, a lot of times there's things you just need to hear. You just need to have things reiterated, like, don't look too far out, chunk things, set goals, but set quarterly goals and all that kind of stuff. And I don't really see myself as an entrepreneur necessarily, but I do have my own business, and I do find myself, it's a challenge to how to focus on clients versus my own business. And I'm going to ask you about that here in a minute. But Alex wants to know how you keep your podcast fresh.
Well, part of it is really trying to look out of the box for guests. So, if I get a chance to go to a conference where there's new people, I always have my radar tuned in. I interviewed a guest today. It'll come out next week. And he owned a business in Florida that he still has. He's got 70 employees, but his wife wanted to live in Austin. So they moved here, and he runs the business remotely, but he's also started his own coaching program because he loves working with entrepreneurs and helping them grow. And everything he said, it was like we were kindred spirits, the way he looked at entrepreneurship, the way he looked at all this stuff. And so we were at a table, we got both invited to a dinner by JB Glossinger from Morning Coach, and he knew him really well. And JB was coming to Austin. We don't really know each other, but he invited me to join him for dinner. And this guy, I was like all over it. I'm like, you have to be on the show. And that was a week ago. And I interviewed him today. So I'm always looking for someone who gets that little hair on the back of my neck to stand up. And like I said, I'm looking for bigger company people now, and things like that. So you just have to shake it up with who your guests are.
Totally. Speaking of getting the hair standing up on your neck, Brian Fanzo says, 2 rock stars watching from the plane.
I am the biggest fanboy of Brian Fanzo. He doesn't know it, but I'm after his Steelers tickets next fall. So he's one of my favorite people.
That is awesome.
I want to buy his Steelers tickets for one game next fall and take my daughter's boyfriend. They live in Pittsburgh, so. Oh,
excellent. Yeah, you're not alone there. Everyone's a fan of the Fanzo. What a name. That's another. It so cracks me up. Like a race car driver named Speed and a tennis player named Smash Nova. Like that's. I use obviously Powers. I got pretty lucky with my last name. So Powers and Marketing is the name of my business, and I'm definitely been utilizing that.
Yeah. Well, here's the trick. I can't sing. In fact, I got asked at church not to sing.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, know thyself. Alex said PCMA's in Pittsburgh next year, so maybe you could time playoffs.
There you go. Or I could go twice. Any chance I get to go see my kid who lives there, it's great. She's a student at Carnegie Mellon.
Oh, right on. Very cool. Okay, so what is the what's the one little nugget that you would give to a podcaster just starting out?
So you have to have a long-term vision. My show, like I said, this article on Inc.com really kind of exploded some of the listenership going on in the last month or two. But I will tell you that, if I had quit after 50 shows, or if I had said, oh, my listenership's not high enough at year 2, I'm going to move on. It's really a long tail deal. I'm surprised how many episodes that are 2 and 3 years old still get downloaded and still get listened to. So if you're going to do the podcast, you can't go in. There's all these people who have courses on how to make $1 million with a podcast. I don't know anybody who makes money except the person with that course. The reality is you have to go in with a set of realistic reasons of what you're trying to accomplish, and you have to be there for the long term. this last year, I picked up 2 speaking gigs, or actually one was a Master of Ceremonies gig and one was a speaking gig. And it came about from regular listeners who were involved with an association who just said, oh, this guy should be on our short list of people that we look at. And the association looked at me and they hired me. And if I didn't have the podcast, I never would have gotten those 2 events. And the way my business works is I get spinoff years later. So I don't even know what those 2 events could be worth over a lifetime. So you have to be patient and you have to know why you're doing it. And if you're not famous and you're starting a podcast to get famous, I think that's a tough road. But if you're doing it to help, help market your brand, help support what you do, and I use it as sort of learning. I've interviewed 300 entrepreneurs and asked them for advice. It's like having 300 professors coming into my living room.
Totally. This is episode 8, man. I didn't ask you that question by accident.
Hey, long tail. When you're up to episode 308, you'll be like, this was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's about building community and, trying to give back to the community and all of that kind of good stuff. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's not like I don't expect to see a direct correlation on my bottom line, in the next month or anything silly like that.
I will tell you where it's given me a lot is it's part of my introduction when I speak to either corporations or associations. It's my bio is like everybody else's bio. Thom has done this, he's done that, he's written books. And then it said he's the host of I think it says wildly popular. No, it doesn't say that. He's the host of the Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do podcast that has now topped over 325 episodes over 3 years. I'll go in and speak for an hour. And I like to think I do a great job when I'm on stage. I give a speech. People come up to me afterwards and they go, I just downloaded your podcast. It's like, I talked about other stuff. Like for an hour, we talked about the other topic. But people get really into it and they get really excited that I have 300 episodes. So I think there's power in longevity with podcasting.
No, for sure. So Alex has a question that's closely related to one that I was going to ask. What's your best advice when marketing your podcast to listeners? And my question was going to be like, how do you divide that time between marketing your own business and your own podcast versus the time you spend on actually on your clients preparing, and obviously you travel a lot and all that kind of stuff. So
I think the biggest problem is I haven't figured out how to market it. Right now I get a little over 1,000 downloads per episode. Some of them get up to 2,000 if the guest is really proactive. But that doesn't put me in the realm of like Entrepreneur on Fire or some of these other podcasts. So I don't really know the answer to how do you best market your podcast. But what happens is that if you do a good job and you do it consistently and people start to like about it, they talk about it, you get written up about it, you're on other people's podcasts. Some people go, oh, I'll go listen to his show. It sort of is a long tail for that. But then to answer your question about how do you balance the two, I use my social media as the main marketing tool for my podcast. It's probably not the main marketing tool for my speaking business. I mean, I use it for that, but I don't think a lot of meeting professionals who are out there and, sales managers who are looking for people to come speak to their meetings, I don't think they're going, I wonder which speaker is tweeting a lot. So I don't think I think that stuff helps. I think social media is a wonderful tool to help keep the reputation alive, but I don't get a lot of speaking business because of it. But I do drive some listeners to my podcast. And even though the topic of entrepreneurship and the topics I speak on, they overlap a little bit, but I'm not an entrepreneur speaker. I'm not. Entrepreneurship isn't my topic that I speak on. It does bolster up my topic of reaching your potential and my topic of really connecting with people in this gadget crazy world. So my marketing all sort of does blend together. I wish I was better at it. I was a much better marketer when I worked for the law firm or the bank or the consulting firm because it was easy for me to market other people. I'm the product, and I always still to this day feel weird going, my podcast is great.
Right.
So,
no, totally.
or I'm a great speaker. You should hire me. So I haven't figured out the secret sauce on how to do it to answer that question, but I keep out there. I keep doing what I'm doing.
Right. Do you create a marketing plan for yourself for the year?
I yes and no. I mean, I don't have a direct marketing plan that I follow. I don't do a what's the thing called where I spell out what my themes for my podcast are going to be. I'm blanking on the term, but publications use it. The calendar. I don't do that, but I do sort of have a plan of what I want to accomplish. And most of my speaking business work comes from word of mouth. So it's just staying involved in the community of the meetings world, in the community of the sales world, and then also in the speaker world, because I get a lot of referrals from other speakers, probably more so than a lot of people. So I stay really active in that world as well.
So for those of us, or for those who might have joined late, this is Thom Singer, and he is a professional speaker and has a podcast called Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. So all good stuff. Alex had one more question, and then we'll move on from the, in terms of podcasting, wondering how did you find your voice and has it evolved over the course of 3 years? Like, have you seen change?
Totally. In fact, if you were to go back and listen to the first few episodes, I think I'm scared shitless. I mean, I think I'm like, really afraid somehow I'm going to hurt my brand, and I'm like trying to be interview boy. Yeah. And I'm, asking, and I had very set questions, and the questions I asked have evolved a little bit, but they're probably 80% still the same questions I've always asked. However, I am more free now when somebody says something to go tell me more about that. And I don't worry if my show goes long. And so if we go off on a tangent, I can still get to all the questions, or I can skip questions if I feel this interview's played itself out. So I am much freer about just letting the conversation go wherever it's going to go. So that's the first piece of that. The second thing is that I read a thing years ago before I was a professional speaker, that before you were truly going to be great, you had to give 300 speeches. And at the time I thought, well, I'll never get that far. Well, now that I've done 750 professional level speeches over the last more than a decade, I will tell you that there's something magical about that 300 number, that you get your confidence on stage after you've given a lot of speeches. And maybe for some people it's 150, maybe for some people it's 400. But for me, 300 was magical. And with my podcast was approaching the 300th episode, I got really comfortable. It's like we're in a bar having a conversation. And so I think I found my voice through experience.
That's awesome. Well, and that's why I love live on social. I was sort of the same thing for me in the beginning. Just, kind of being afraid to be on camera, being afraid I would flub. And I think that it helps that no one expects perfection on live video.
Right.
I always strive for perfection, never really hit it. but I like these mid-month episodes where, we can see each other on video when we're recording the podcast normally too. So that helps a little bit. In the beginning, did you do it? Was it by phone, or did you always? Yeah.
I always use Skype, or now I use Zoom to do the recording. So I've always had that video option. The problem is Skype, at least 3 years ago, used to get a little wonky. So we'd often turn the video off so that you get a better stream. Zoom, I switched over to that year and a half ago. It seemed to be a little more stable, although I think Skype is probably better now too. Just because as technology goes forward, I like having the video on, even though I never record the video. My show is just audio. I do like having it on because you can see the other person.
Yeah, totally. So, how many days of the year do you think you're on the road?
So last year it was for speaking and for the master ceremony stuff, because the MC stuff can be 3 and 4 days when I'm there. A lot of speakers fly in and fly out. It's a one-night trip. My average trip is 2 or 3 nights. So I was on the road about 120 days, a little more than that last year. Okay,
that makes sense. So when you MC, what you're trying to do is like string everything together, right? Like kind of weave from speaker to speaker and presentation to presentation, kind of like make it all make sense together for the audience.
Yeah, and I do a thing I call the conference catalyst, which is my job is to really change the nature of how people really behave at the conference. So my goal is to get people to talk to each other more. We live in a world where people are crazy on their gadgets. And so my content from the keynote I've been doing for several years has been connecting with people in a gadget crazy world. And so I usually open the conference either as the keynote speaker for the first morning, or if they already have a keynote speaker, I try to get them to give me 15 or 20 minutes, and I do what I call the pre-note. And I kick it off with this content about what can we do, and then I turn it around a little bit and say, how do we make this the best conference you'll ever go to? And meeting planners like it because the people are like, yeah, let's make this the best conference. And I just tell them what to do. And then throughout the rest of the time as MC, I'm weaving together the themes of all the speakers, kind of recapping, but I'm also emphasizing that whole piece of how do we connect better. And with my new content on potential, it still works the same way. I can do the whole thing about the gap between potential and results, and I spin it around and say, what about this conference? We have a lot of potential the next 3 days. how can we make this the best conference ever? And it's the same theme with the other content. And I just weave that through over the whole 3 or 4 days of the conference.
That's fantastic. That's my favorite kind of MC. I like funny people, and I know you're funny too, but meaning people who aren't just up there trying to be funny.
Yeah, I'm not a juggler. I'm not a magician. I'm not a comic, but I don't bill myself as a humorist. But the audience will laugh at every time I'm on stage. So I try to keep it fun rather than funny.
Right. So since you mentioned gadgets, it's a good segue into you have a latest new app or gadget that you want to share with our viewers?
I thought about this because I knew you were going to ask this, because you ask everybody this, and I'd love to say that I'm Tom the gadget guy and that I'm always on top of the new stuff. I'm always the guy who wants to say, I don't know, it's my iPhone in general. But the truth is, the newest app I got was actually a Christmas present. So I mentor this young gentleman he's 28 years old, and we met like 4 years ago, and he's just never gone away. He now calls me dad, and we really do have sort of a father-son relationship. I love the kid. He's a good guy. In fact, my kids asked, he's not in the will, is he? And I said, no. And the kids are like, okay, you can still be friends with him then. As long as he's not inheriting anything, this relationship is approved. But without him having to, he sent me a Christmas present, and he sent me a thing that was called Movie Pass. And essentially, I get free movies at 4,000 theaters around the country, unlimited for the next 6 months. And it's an app. So when I'm traveling, if I have a free night and I'm traveling by myself, if my wife doesn't come with me and I have nothing to do, I can go see the latest movie just by clicking an app on my phone. In like one click, I can buy a seat, pick the seat, and I can pick something. The GPS will, send me to the theater that's closest to the hotel in whatever city I'm in. And so I just got this for Christmas. I haven't used it yet, but I have a free night in Orlando next week, so I might give it a go.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's called Movie Pass?
It is called Movie Pass, and it's the logo of it. It's just a red square with a white M in it, if you're looking it up.
That is fantastic. I
have no idea what he paid for it, but it came with like a little Visa prepaid credit card, but I can put it into the app, and it's unlimited, I guess, for 6 months.
Nice.
Haven't used it yet, but I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate that, Jake.
Getting a free night when you're out on show site is like gold too, right? that doesn't happen very often, at least for me.
No, it doesn't.
So is that the next random city you'll be running in?
Yes, Orlando will be my next city, and if I'm fortunate, it should be warm enough. I was in Chicago yesterday and the day before, and it was 14 to 25 degrees, and so I did not go out for a run. But I'll be in Orlando on Monday, and I think maybe I can go put in a couple miles.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite. I love seeing all your posts about like you're running, and you're like in every city across the country.
Well, what people need to know is that I weighed 30 pounds more 2 years ago and had never run a mile in my life. So this running thing, I took up running at 49 years old, and I ran a half marathon. And after you do a half marathon, everybody tells you once you do a half, you're gonna want to do a whole. And the reality is they're lying. I have no desire to even run another half marathon, but I do still run 3 to 5 miles about 3 days a week.
Yeah, so I had a goal to run a half, and then did it, and then I wanted to do the triple. In San Diego, we have a triple crown, which is if you do these 3 half marathons that are within this 7-month period, you get an extra special medal. So
nice.
I decided to do that for the bling, right? And yeah, but never again. My distance running days are gone. Awesome. So all right. So I wanted to remind everyone that you can find Making a Marketer on iTunes. We're going to have a newly launched blog here in a couple weeks. So right now, iTunes is the spot. We are on Twitter at Make a Marketer, and you can find me on Twitter at Megan Powers. Tom, what's how can people find you?
Everything is at thomsinger.com. That's THOMSINGER.com. But I'll tell you a secret. If you spell Tom T-O-M and go to thomsinger.com, TOMSINGER.com, you'll still get there. It'll redirect.
I figured, yeah, you got to do that because it's not that intuitive, right?
No, people, I don't know why when people go from Thomas, Thomas, to Tom, I don't know why they take out the H. I just got rid of the ass.
That's awesome. My dad's a Tom. No, my dad's a no H Tom. So.
Yeah, most are. Yeah. My daughter dates a young man who is from San Diego, and he goes by Thomas, and he only goes by Thomas. He's not Tom. He's not Tommy. Uh, but I always tell people, so he's a math genius, and I always tell people his name's Thomas. And my name's Thomas. He's from Southern California. I'm from Southern California. He's a genius. Well, 2 out of 3. He's like 2 out of 3 is like your dad.
Yeah, nice. I had a professor in college who was a TH Tom, and he always mispronounced my name, and I feel like he then was doing it just to spite me. And I called him out on it, and he thinks, he was calling me Megan and not Megan. And he's like, oh, it's too subtle. I go, okay, so can I call you Thom?
No.
He said, you better not.
Yeah, no, you can't. No.
So that kind of ended that. So I want to thank you for coming on. I know you're a busy dude, but I know you also appreciate the plight of the podcaster, and I always love having good guests on. So
love to do it.
And thank you everyone who was on the live. I really appreciate all of the questions and the activity. This was super fun. And for those who listen on the replay, thank you very much for that. And on the podcast, this has been episode 8 of Making a Marketer, and we will catch you next time.